And so, Tom, perhaps if we can kick off with, give us a bit of background on you and how you kind of got into technology.
Sure. Well, thanks for the opportunity to get involved with the community. I have a somewhat exotic, but maybe not as exotic as some of the people that you've spoken to. But I mean, I started off actually being what was known as a polygon pusher. So this is in the chip design, right? It's actual silicon physical device design. So I started off, I did an electronics degree. I did that for many happy years, and kind of, I suppose, where the architecture piece comes in is I got involved in pre-sales. And it was actually selling chip design software. And that, you can imagine that starts off being very, very technical, right? What's the best way to simulate a given piece of silicon? And there's 15,000 parameters that need to be tweaked and all this kind of stuff. But it began to occur to me actually that almost as important as that, and sometimes more important than that, is the people aspect, right? How do you get across to someone who doesn't understand what you're going to present to them? How do you get it across to them the best possible way? What are their thought processes, and how do you guide them along the right path? Subsequent to that move to Singapore, there isn't a great big chip design industry in Singapore, so use that as an opportunity really. I started off trying to sell FPGA design into banks, look, I can make your super fast trading super faster. Turns out they weren't particularly interested in that, principally because they'd already started on it and most of them had failed at it.
Right.
But that's how I got into kind of the financial services industry and joined a company called Solace, kind of in the middleware space, and started off as a kind of a pre-sales engineer.
Talk a little bit about what you do day to day at Solace. What's your role, and what do you tend to do day to day?
Yeah, so I mean, my official title is Distinguished Engineer. I think that's more to do with grey hairs than anything else, but there we go. Yeah, so it's essentially understanding customer problems, and increasingly that's from a business point of view rather than I have technical problem X. Right. Rather than I need to find a use case, it's more or less about understanding the business problems that they're encountering and helping people understand often not just what's the best way to apply a piece of Solace technology, for instance, but kind of technology as a whole. So I have been in conversations where I've said to people, do you know what? You probably don't want to use this particular piece of technology in this domain. Have a look at that. Sometimes it's about, do you know what? It's not the right time for you right now to be considering us. When you start to see X, Y, and Z, then it's time to start talking to us. It's easy to say, I think, in pre-sales, I hate to go to the pre-sales again, but it's easy to always want, I think it's a mistake a lot of pre-sales people make, is that they want to, oh, I've got to tell them about this particular feature because it might help with this particular problem. As I've matured, I think I've begun to realize that that's probably not the best approach. What do we do in Solace? Well, we're all about event-driven architectures, okay? So it's helping people understand exactly what event-driven architectures are, how they can help with their business, and really lay the technical foundation, the enablement layer that enables them to build out their event-driven architecture.
That's a really interesting sort of insight there into the sort of journey from the engineering sort of mindset into the architecture mindset. So that's, yeah, that's really nice. I mean, what other things, I guess you've perhaps learned along the way of, you know, perhaps the softer skill side, or, you know, I don't want to lead the witness too much here, but what kind of things have you kind of seen on that sort of journey from being, you know, more of a, you know, technical specialist to more of that sort of pre-sales architect?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, you do learn to, I hate to say it, you kind of begin to categorize people in numerous domains, right? It's not simply a kind of good or bad, but, you know, first of all, you have to understand their technical level of competence, right? Yeah. And this is not only pre-sales, this is just architecture generally, right? Who am I talking to here? It's good to understand where they come from.
Yeah.
Because that tells you, I mean, look, as an architect, normally, again, not just pre-sales, as an architect, you're talking about making changes, right? You're not talking about changes, kind of why you're there. Understanding where they come from, both from a kind of technical point of view and kind of personally, helps you understand, again, what their thought process is likely to be around change. Because let's face it, most people don't like change. Being able to put yourself in somebody else's shoes in that way is probably one of the key aspects to it. It's more than just empathy. It's that ability to investigate another person's viewpoint. So it's not just empathizing with it, but it's actually, you know, that active wanting to understand someone. And it's funny, I don't think it's definitely helps to have, you know, kind of be amiable and outgoing and friendly and stuff. But I'll always remember there was an applications engineer from an FPGA company, actually. And to his credit, this guy was actually very, very shy.
Mm-hmm.
But I remember once I was at a corporate event that he was kind of part hosting, and I got stuck on my own. I was kind of sitting by the bar, having a drink, and he broke off his conversation, just came over to talk to me. And I'll always remember that as a moment thinking, yeah, all right, there's somebody who understands the more personal aspects of it. It's nothing to do with the job that we're doing.
Yeah.
It's just that he understands, even though he probably wanted to go and talk to the few people that he was really good friends with, he understood that it was kind of unpleasant for me to be sitting there on my own, and made the effort to make a difference to that. And it's that kind of understanding of people. Look, you're going to have to make a change. It might be slightly unpleasant for you, but here's how I can kind of help you move forward with that. I think is one of the critical abilities of an architect. I mean, obviously, a large part of the role is kind of a technical guidance role, mm-hmm. and making technical decisions. Most people with a technical bent can do that. It's the ability to bring people along with you while you're doing that. I think is one of the key characteristics.
Yeah, that kind of influencing, educating, negotiating, that sort of,
that's right. Yeah.
I want to move on to the question that I ask pretty much everyone I do these conversations with, which is,
right.
What do they see as the, given the channel is all about Architect Tomorrow, Tom, your view on what you think is sort of up and coming, or is the future of integration architecture?
I mean, I like this phrase of polyglot integration. We talked earlier about if one vendor tells you they've got the way of doing it, then, you know, the one only way of doing it, that's going to be the way of doing it. I don't believe that. I don't believe, for instance, event-driven architectures are always the right solution. I don't believe that APIs are always going to be the right solution. A good example is if you look at GraphQL versus your typical REST API, GraphQL puts enormous load on the server. There's an awful lot of work you have to do on the server, right? So,
well, that kind of makes sense, right? Because you're effectively reducing the complexity of the number of APIs that the client would have previously had to call. I mean, for those that don't know what GraphQL does, essentially it aggregates a lot of different APIs into one kind of exchange of data, right? Rather than lots and lots of little independent queries, you can get, I suppose, a graph, as in a connected sort of graph of data kind of back to the client rather than lots of independent.
I mean, the key point with something like GraphQL, right, is that you are defining as the client exactly what data you want to receive in a single query, right? Whereas with a typical REST API, you expose an interface, and as far as the client's concerned, that's it. So you often end up with this under and over responding, right? So you'll either give the client way too much data, or you'll give them not enough, and they'll have to go off and make another load of queries. There will be lots of occasions where a single interface is well understood, and all you do is you just call it, you get back the data you expect to get back, and that's great. And then there will be other times when that's not applicable, either because of the complexity of the query that you're asking, or because you're over a constrained channel like a mobile channel, which is where the whole GraphQL thing came from. And I think you can apply that kind of thinking across integration, right? If you look at the kind of iPaaS space, it's great for point-to-point style of integration. But so when you're trying to send data to a particular known entity, it's brilliant. But what about the case when actually you need to send data to multiple entities? What if those multiple entities are geographically dispersed? What if they're in different environments, like on-premise and on cloud, that kind of thing? And I think that's where this approach of kind of polyglot, I'm deliberately paraphrasing kind of microservices speak here, but polyglot integration, I think, is definitely going to be an approach going forward. So that gives you the ability to be able to mix and match the best integration technology to the integration task. Because why is that? It's simply because of the increasing amount of integration that's going to have to be done, and the increasing speed at which it's going to have to be done, and the different environments you're going to come across. Legacy has a habit of hanging around, and it has a habit of tying you to on-prem.
Yeah. So the integration architecture of tomorrow is essentially a basket of different options, which every business needs to make sure that they know how how to deploy them well, and in what situations that they make most sense to use, right? So we're talking here about a combination of APIs, a combination of event-driven, GraphQL perhaps for the mobile front end.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, look, so it's been great catching up.
Yes, it's a pleasure.
And I look forward to speaking to you again in the near future.
Perfect. Thanks a lot.
All right. Thanks.
Bye-bye.